Hello, Ferality! So great to be back. My name is Voxian. I'm a avatar creator. I make avatars with very unique body types. I also run the virtual limbs community. You may have seen me at the last year's Ferality for the intro to Final IK panel. It's such a dream to be back here. It's great to see you all again. As a reminder, I'm not affiliated with Root Motion. I just use their scripts. Today we're going to be talking about a lot of IK stuff. So I have a new friend here. I want y'all to introduce you to Jerry. So Jerry's my good friend and AI assistant. He's definitely not here to steal anybody's artwork. Right, Jerry? Okay, good. So what is Final IK? We're going to do a quick refresher from last year just to kind of get us all on the right foot. First off, inverse kinematics. Inverse kinematics is a process of calculating joint angles based on the start and end point. And that's can be 3 joints. It could be actually a lot more than that as well. We'll get into that later, though. So this is a list of all the IK components that are allowed and permitted and whitelisted by VRChat. We've talked about these before, but we're gonna try to show you which ones we've talked about. So at last year's panel, we talked about the grappling hook, and here's a quick little demo of what we did. So we had a little bit of ray cast out from my finger. We were able to see the floor, shoot a grappling hook, and then we were able to put a seat on there. All right, and then pull them to me. Okay, so at that demo, we talked about the following: aim IK, fabrics, grounders, and rotation limits. We didn't even hit half of them, but today we'll be talking a lot more. So what else can we use this for? Well, Digigrade legs and followers are 2 of the topics I'd like to cover today, but there's so many more. Keep your dreams wild and keep interested in trying to find new applications for this stuff. It's really exciting to see what people come up with. So those 2 topics we're going to be talking about are going to be using fabrics, grounders, limb IKs, VR IKs, IK execution orders, and fabric roots. So we got a lot to cover here. So let's go ahead and get started. Digigrade legs. So what is a digi leg or digitigrade leg? So typically a human leg has 3 main joints involved in the motion. It has the thigh, the knee, and the foot. But digitigrade legs actually stand on their toes, so you end up with 4 main joints: thighs, knees, ankles, toes. And a lot of times those are called different things. It's not necessarily going to be those naming conventions, but that's kind of just a general rule of thumb. So what's a digigrade illusion? A lot of times fursuiters, for example, they can't just change their bones. They can't stand on their toes the whole time. I know sometimes they'll have like those really intricate mechanical contraptions that they stand on. It's kind of like stilts. But if you don't have any of that stuff, how do you make it look like you're actually digi? Well, they put padding in it. They put extra padding in their knee, they put extra padding in their ankles. And putting those 2 things together, you end up with kind of a fake-looking digi effect. A lot of times, VR creators actually do the exact same thing. So in the example up there, I've got this character only has the 3 joints, but those 3 joints are attached to a mesh that kind of looks like it has an extra knee and big ankle and stuff like that. And that's a pretty common way to do it. So what is true digigrade? Well, every bone is able to actually bend in some way, shape, or form. So why do we need Final IK for this? Well, technically you don't. There's a lot of avatars that find other ways to control the extra joint. So they use either a combination of constraints or contacts, animations, fizz bones. There's all kinds of techniques. I've seen some great stuff out there. Those are completely valid. They work really great. Sometimes you'll just see people do like I recommended or mentioned in the last panel here, where they just kind of just fake it. They just make it look like it's a digi leg, but it's not really. So what are the advantages to using IK instead? Well, there's a couple things. First off, your shown foot the actual location where your foot is, will always match your real foot. And that's really big, especially when you're using full body, to be able to feel exactly where your foot should be is in the actual location it actually is. With careful tuning, the constraint and animation methods can actually achieve this too, but it takes like perfect math and very careful, very careful animations to make that perfect. There's a lot of people that have done it great, and I commend them for it because it takes a lot of work to get that perfect. Also, if you're using IK, there's a couple things you can do differently than any other kind of method. One of them is you can actually twist the knee separately from the ankle. I'll have a video about this in a second. And then you can also attach completely different armatures together. So if you have a character that has one particular proportions of legs or arms, and you want to attach it to a different size limb or a leg, you can actually attach that just fine, and it will attach and it'll work as long as you don't overextend the amount of movement. All right, so let's do a quick video here. So the big thing is to notice, as I tilt my toes down, my knee pops up, and I can twist my ankle separately from my knee. All right, so let's take a quick roadmap of what we're going to actually have to do to achieve this. Okay, so we're going to have to separate the skin bones from your humanoid. So we're going to have to make sure that your legs, shown legs, are separate from your real legs. Kind of like how we do with a lot of other mapping techniques. Then we're going to make a duplicate of our digibones, make the foot targets, add constraints, set up the IK scripts, adjust the humanoid knee, and then offset the upper IK. That's a lot, I know. We'll get through it here in a minute. So what components are we going to need? We're going to need some parent constraints to hold the hip and the foot targets in place, limb IK for the thigh, and limb IK for the ankle, and then IK execution order to make sure that these things happen in the correct order. All right, so hopefully I don't lose anybody. Just a little bit of blender is required. So we need to actually have joints to be able to control. So even if you have a character that doesn't actually have those joints, that extra ankle joint, you're going to need to add it. This can be done very easily. It's not a whole lot of effort, but it does require a little bit of actual blender work to make this happen. So what I did in this example was I added the ankle joint itself, and then I pointed it towards the toes. And the way that I kind of parented them, I parented it such that it was just an extra child of the knee. So they kind of move together by default. So if you don't have any controls on this rig, it'll actually work as if it didn't have this ankle joint in the first place. But it allows you to pull those pieces out and actually attach them and control them. I put a little bit of skin weighting on that area and call it a day. Some of you, if you're paying attention, may have noticed that this is actually not Blender. I do my work in Maya, but it's the same process. So next off, we need to preserve the humanoid. So we need to make sure that we have an extra set of joints for VR chat to control. These don't need to have any skin weights or anything, but they need to be in the hierarchy. So just duplicate your bones and have them in there. All right, now we're done with Blender. Let's move on to Unity. All right, so the parent constraints. So this is simple. We just need to have some way to hold the hip in place, specifically because a lot of the IK scripts really need to be outside of your armature to be able to work properly in VR chat. So we pull them outside. We're going to be pulling them outside and attaching them with constraints. Note: do not use Unity constraints, the built-in ones. They're very much more laggy than the new VR chat ones. The VR chat ones have some cool features that we won't be using in this demo, but they are very useful. So, humanoid limb IK. This is the first actual IK script that we need to add. What this does really is just controls the thigh. You'll notice there's a couple weird oddities about it that we'll actually get into a lot later, but there's the knee is a little bit further down from my knee, and the ankle and the toe are a little bit further back than my actual foot. This is intentional, but I'll get to that in the offset section. So now the lower limb IK. This is the part that controls most of the leg, which is the knee, the ankle, and the foot. The very last joint of this is perfectly rotationed to the actual target that you're aiming at, and that keeps all of this in check and make sure your toes point the right direction. One thing I want to point out is there is a little piece in there where you can choose the bend goal. You can either choose target, or you can choose parent, or you can choose goal. And in this case, I've chosen target for this one because I want to make sure that my ankle points wherever my toes point. And in the case of the humanoid limb IK, I actually wanted them to point towards the parent, which would be wherever the hip points. That way that they rotate separately. All right, so then IK execution order. This is the last step of it, really. This just makes sure everything calculates in the correct order. We put the uppers before the lowers. And the reason we do this is because if you try to calculate the second joints first and then the first joints, you get all out of whack and it jitters like crazy. All right, so the parent constraints and skin joints. So let's go ahead and pull let's pull the actual legs out. So we're going to try and constrain all of the existing joints that we had to this new chain, and that'll actually let us control them. Theoretically, you could pull these out of the armature ahead of time if you wanted to, but and not use constraints, but it gets harder to manage inside of Blender. So this is, I think, a better solution, just to have a set of constraints on them. All right, some fine tuning. I mentioned a few weird oddities about the knee and the ankle and the toes. Let's get into that. So knee trackers, first off. By default, the system I just described actually won't follow your knee trackers if you happen to have any. So let's talk about how to set up a goal. So I mentioned earlier you could use goals. Well, let's go ahead and try it. So we'll put an object way out in front of our knee, and then we'll actually parent that to our thigh or our knee and get that to follow our actual knees. So your humanoid legs of your actual humanoid legs can then control the upper knee joint aim direction. The knee lift offset. This is that toes pointing thing I talked about earlier. This is very much a feature that I've found to really enjoy because it helps with making it look more realistic. This is not required, but it does make it seem a little more believable. What we're going to do here is we're going to have the very last joint tied in a little bit further back than our actual foot. And the further back it goes, the more of this knee lift that you get. So you can kind of choose how much knee lift that is acquired from this. If you want to, you can just set this exactly the same, and then you'll get no knee lift. That's totally fine. All right, the ankle bend offset. This is kind of the main digi aspect of the whole thing. The further that your knee, the knee of the IK is further down from your actual knee, the more of this ankle bend that you're going to get. So if you moved it really, really far down, you'll actually get so much ankle bend that you'll flip your knee or flip your ankle, and that's not really ideal. So what I do is I set it to about 25% of the full distance between knee and toe. So it's kind of like just barely a little bit further down, and when you lift your foot, it kind of pulls in. As a tar, I'm not exactly the best example, but this is a good, much better example for how a regular digi leg works. So if that kind of got you lost or confused, don't worry, it's fine. I know there's a lot of things in here that are new to everybody and they haven't necessarily seen these scripts before. I'll actually be providing a free setup script for this and a prefab for it. So you can either choose to run the script on your armature and then actually attach it all, or you can choose to just use it as an example and create your own from it. What this script does is essentially takes your actual leg joints, pulls them out, moves all of my armature to make it match your leg lengths and things like that, and then attaches it back to your real legs. So all you have to do is fill out all the different objects inside of here, hit run, and it'll do the rest for you. So this is a pretty helpful thing that'll be available here in just a little bit. All right, so let's go on to our topic number 2, walking followers, and that's where our friend Jerry comes in. All right, followers are a lot of fun. We've seen them everywhere. We've seen them kind of just on various bases and avatars and standalone things. Some of the first ones were like the Among Us follower, but there's been a lot of other fun ones that have come out. So we're going to try and dig into this and bite into this topic a little bit. All right, first off, let's just look at the most simple, most basic form of a follower that you can possibly do, okay? This is the absolute bare minimum required. All you need is a world constraint and a follower constraint. That's it. So what these are is the world constraint is tied to the world itself, so not to your avatar. And when you move, it does not move. The follower is an object that is tied to you or a piece on you or something like that using different parent constraint targets, and it's also tied to itself. By having it target itself, it creates kind of a feedback loop, and what ends up happening is it just slowly moves towards you. In my example here, I have it set to 1 for itself, and then 0.1 for how much it's trying to follow the next object that it's trying to follow. There's a lot of problems with this, though. Okay, the first thing is it doesn't turn towards where it's aiming. It just kind of just slowly, lazily gets there and aims eventually at you. So that's one problem. The other problem is it's desynced for players, and it's also not consistent in how fast it moves. So the further away it is from its target, the faster it's going to move, and the closer it is, the slower it's going to move. In some cases, that's intentional, and that's something you want. In some cases, that's not what you want. So it all depends on what the application is calling for. So there's a VR Labs follower script that's kind of, or not script, but prefab that's already available. This has been up for a long time. And it does a couple fixes for this kind of thing. One of the things it does is it has a aim, so it does actually look towards the direction that you're trying to go. And then the other thing is it kind of solves for the speed issues. It has a set of contacts in there that says, okay, I need to be this fast and this far away, and it does some cool stuff with that. It's great. You can find this at their GitHub, VR Labs follower. All right. But what if you wanted a follower that could walk? Okay. All right. That's where it gets complicated, and that's where we're going to be talking about today in depth. So first off, let's give Jerry a look here. All right. So you'll see he follows me as I walk around. In my example, I've got a laser pointer, and I allow myself to point somewhere, and then he goes to that spot. And the big thing to note is he's staying on the ground. Like he's actually going up and down this this rocky walk path. He's animated to walk, animated to run. Get over here. There he is. All right, so how would we achieve something like this? So if you didn't have IK, you would need to do a couple things. You would need to have a follower system, like we talked about. You need to have a set of locomotion animations, and you'd have to have some way to actually control the character while doing that. Specifically in the case of, like, you need to actually make him walk or hobble or whatever you're planning on doing. Unfortunately, even if you did all of this, there's no way to get him to stop clipping through floors. Your follower would go straight through a staircase. Your follower would go straight through walls. He would go. You wouldn't even go up cliffs and things like I showed there in the demo. So let's take a look at a roadmap of how we're going to accomplish this with IK. So the big things we need is we need to have a simple follower system to start with, as expected from what we talked about earlier. But we also need to ground it to the floor and then configure the character to walk. We're going to be using an example here. This is Steve. He is the most human that has ever humaned. He is my example human that is as most proportionally standard as I possibly can get. Now, if we have time, we're going to get into a few bonus topics related to how this is set up, and we're going to talk about calculating velocity, automatically swapping animations, and also how to direct him with a laser pointer, kind of like what we did in our demo from last year, adding that to the followers. All right, so let's get started. All right, so first off, we need a world constraint. So there's a trick with world constraints. If you want it to follow something in the world at actually world center, the best way to do it is to actually make a prefab in your scene and then target that prefab outside of your scene with a constraint. It's kind of odd to explain, but you'll see that there's an arrow there. I'm dragging in the world constraint prefab into my target. You could use the VR chat freeze to world. That also does work as well. Or you could use IK. So in our example here, we are actually going to use an IK world constraint. So This is to try and prevent as much jitter as possible, specifically because IK can then figure itself out a little bit better. So let's get started. That's going to be 2 bones going up and down by a unit of 1. There's the world root and the world root end, and you can see they're up and down by 1. And then we attach a fabric to those 2 bones. We actually give it no target. And then the fabric root is what kind of tries to pull the fabric towards the direction of whatever you're targeting. In our case, it's nothing. So it'll try to keep it in world space. And then the aim IK. This will let us actually aim it into world space. So this will keep us in the direction of whatever world XYZ is. And once again, we are aiming at nothing. And then we need an IK execution order to keep these calculating in the correct order. Specifically, we like to have the root first, then the fabric, then the aim IK. All right, now let's actually get into what we're gonna do with this. So we've got an object that's stuck in world space. Let's add that smooth constraint. So we're gonna put a constraint in. We're gonna have it target itself and target whatever your target is. And what it's targeting can be literally anything. You could target the floor next to you, or your head, or your hand, or in some cases the end of a laser pointer. And then we need to raycast. So we need to actually be able to get this thing to stay on the ground. So there's going to be 2 parts to this. There's the lim IK and the grounder. And this is a bit of a strange setup, but this is something that I kind of found from the VR Labs Discord. There's a trick that you can do to make it go really, really, really far to raycast out, and you take your object and then you make the next object that goes into it way down by 100 units, and then back up by 50. And this allows the IK to stretch very, very far. In my example last year, I did the same kind of thing, but I did it on a much smaller scale. So it couldn't have reached quite as far as this example can, which is great. I don't think most situations you're going to be 100 feet or 100 meters off the ground. So this is a pretty robust way of doing it. So the lim IK for this is just those 3 joints tied in the lim IK. And you actually don't even need to have a target for it or anything. You do need to have a scale constraint on this, though, because we found that if you adjust the scale at all, it will essentially stop calculating or calculating correctly. So you do have to have a world scale constraint on this. All right, and then we need the actual grounder script itself. This just allows that script to try and find the ground, and by ground, it actually can be defined by a lot of things. In this example, or most of my examples, I use 2 layers. There's the default layer and the environment layer, and those are part of that layer mixed. So that's what actually keeps it checking for what you're trying to check for in the world. Now, not every world has this set up correctly. Some worlds you'll get into and the floor is defined as something else entirely. When that happens, the grounder tries to just go to 100 units down. And so your follower just disappears. So that's something that needs to be able to be toggled off. And then actually what gets us into the last piece here, the container. So this is something I found from other prefabs, kind of having a constraint that toggles the whole system on or off, and whether you're targeting or not. And all this is really doing is it's just tied to the very last joint of that chain. So by default, it goes 100 units down in the ground, and it'll disappear. So what we do is we just set the weight to 0 by default, and then adjust it up when we're actually ready to activate it. Easy to toggle on, easy to toggle off. So hopefully I didn't lose you yet. There's a lot here, I know. We're about halfway there or so through the walking follower parts. So just a reminder, all of this will be available online after we're done, and we'll also have prefabs for you to work with. Gary, what are you doing? All right. So let's take a look at automatic walking. So how do we get automatic steps? There's a lot to this, and I know there's a lot of components to look at there. Let me just give a quick introduction to why there's so many of them. We have VRIKs, fabrics, grounders, and execution orders. Kind of like what we've talked about already. There's a few new scripts here. But the reason why there are 7 copies of each of these is because of scaling. We currently don't have any way to adjust this system for scaling. So when the avatar or the follower gets bigger or smaller, there's no way to adjust for it except for toggling on and off different sets of these. And I'll show you exactly what components and stuff are unable to be scaled in a little bit here. But that's why there's so much going on. So VRIK is the first real script we need to get into. This is the main root of everything that happens when it comes to how to make automatic steps. So first thing you need a bog standard human reference. So we're going back to Steve. Steve is in there. He's actually inside of my brute friend here. Let me show you him real quick. There he is. Look at him. Hopefully that comes through. Sorry to the yeah, there he is. So he's our bog standard human. He doesn't do anything special, but he's being covered up by our much more pretty fruit follower. Okay. So first off, we need to have a bog standard human. So we're going to put him into the references section of the VRIK. And we're going to basically be treating him as if he is a human VR user. So he actually has to have everything set up as if he was just literally you, but inside of you. It's kind of a strange setup, but it works really well. So I made a little box here to call out some of the pieces that are not scaled that need to be adjusted. Specifically foot distance and foot or step threshold. Those two components or those two variables cannot be animated. And that's just a common thing with Final IK is you actually can't animate those pieces. But they also can't be scaled. So those two pieces, as you adjust your character, your feet, like let's say you get bigger, the feet get closer together because the foot distance is smaller relative to the character size. So it does get kind of difficult to get that to line in. So that's why we have 7 of them. Okay. Fabric. So we need to actually have some way to keep the feet on the ground. These 2 scripts are 1 for each leg. And they have no targets. They're just assigned to the legs. They will let us move the legs in addition to already having the movement from VRIK. So the grounder script itself, we tie in those 2 scripts into this. Once again, we have another variable that we can't scale, which is the max step. This chooses how far down into the floor that you try to calculate, and we can't scale that number. All right, IK execution order. So this gets us in the right order of things. So we need to first off calculate the world. So we need to calculate the world constraint with those first 3 entries. And then the last 3, VRIK, actually calculate foot stepping. And then the last 2 do the grounding to the floor. Look, Ma, I'm doing it. I'm doing it. So he will walk, but it's not very good yet. If you have this part of the script in there and you see it, you'll notice he's T-posing. He kind of hobbles, kind of jittery. You know, it's not very pretty. So Steve may be a wonderful hobbling zombie, but hopefully the final result is not, and that's what the bonus sections are for. So based on timing here, I think I can get into a little bit of this. So we have 3 things that we're going to talk about quickly. I'm going to go through this much faster than the other section. So we can calculate the velocity of that character, automatically swap in animations, or direct him with a laser pointer. So first off, velocity calculations. So we're going to use Fizzbones in this case to figure out how fast he's moving. We're going to put a scale constraint on everything first. Then we're going to have 2 Fizzbones, 1 in each direction. And they have squish and stretch on them. So as you move, they will squish and stretch. We're going to do a blend tree to try and calculate the amount of squish and stretch and then convert that into an output value and then smooth that. And I realize I'm probably losing most people here, but that's okay. This stuff will be available in the example. Then we're going to put some animations on our character. So there's a lot of ways to do this, but generally, like Mixamo, for example, is a really common way to get some animations for your character. You could animate it by hand, things like that. There's a lot of ways to do this, but generally, though, you will have to have a non-humanoid animation because it will be inside of your avatar, not actually attached to you. So you'll need to have some way to get that information together. Oh, you could also try mocap as well. All right, so then we need to actually have those animations do something. So we're going to put that into a locomotion tree. So there's a way that you can use that's similar to how VRChat controls how your motions work to control your speed and your animations based on that. And then we need a way to actually swap motions. So I put a contact on my guy and had him react to that contact. So as he gets closer to it, he swaps dynamically into VRIK, which is the automatic thing. And then when he's further away from me, he does my animations on him. So these are the two modes, and this is kind of the way to blend between those. There are other ways to do this, of course. You could just use two states. You could just always have it be animations if you want. That's fine too. So laser pointer, this is kind of that red arrow I was pointing to earlier, and I can demo that here real quick. So that'll be an easy way to figure out the location. What's nice about this is that the endpoint is actually an object. So let's go ahead and put our brute friend over here a little bit. He's going to kind of turn towards me slowly. All right. So how do we do this? It's a lot of pieces to it. We're going to choose our mode. So that's gesture based and things like that. How do we get to which mode we want to be in? I even have a thing in here for dancing, which is what the break dance was earlier. And then the miscellaneous controls, this allows you to just do other things. So in my case, it lets me turn on Steve. It also lets me turn on Steve's two brothers, which you might find in the prefab later. All right, so that was pretty much the gist of how those two systems work. So first off, most importantly, we have free prefabs. So if you go to my Jinxie page, you'll be able to download those. No cost or anything like that. They're just examples of what I showed today with all the setups and things that I demonstrated here. There's also a set of the slides, so you can follow that up later. So just to be clear on one thing, though, this prefab will include Steve, but not Jerry. Jerry's my brute friend, and he's a separate prefab or separate thing entirely. But it will have Steve in there, so if you need a bog standard human, you got him in there.
Q&A is open in the Discord.
Oh. All right. So quick credits here. We have some people that have helped me with this along the way, and mainly I just want a big call out and hugs and thank yous to the Virtual Limbs community for supporting everything that I do. And thank you as well for watching this and following along, and hopefully I didn't lose you too much. So at this point, I'll open it up for questions. Make sure you join the Virtual Limbs community. This is a community that I run related to anything with non-humanoid avatars and bodies and things like that. It's a great place to meet other creators and kind of talk about these kind of IK topics. That's also a great place to contact me if you'd like to ask me some questions about these prefabs and things like that.
Hello. Are you ready for some questions?
Absolutely. Let's get to it.
Questions are open and available in the Ferality Discord under the Leg Up IK channel. If you do have any questions, feel free to post them there. That's where we will be reading them off. And then I have a question from Red. It says, is it a Maya script, Blender script, or a Unity package script?
Oh, yeah, of course. So all of the scripts and prefabs I just talked about are actually Unity packages. They're stuff that's within Unity. Mm-hmm. The Blender side you'll have to do yourself, I'm sorry. But there's only 2 slides of Blender. Hopefully it's not too bad.
Second question from Paper Fan. How easy is it to convert a digi rig that uses the digi like bones constrained to plenty bones to this IK method?
Oh, very, very easy actually. So if you already have digi legs using constraints in IK or not everything but IK, you can actually just run the script on those legs and it'll work. So that's a great way to do it. If you don't use the script though, you will have a hard time because you don't have any humanoid bones to attach to. So you may have some troubles there. But if you use the script, it'll pull those bones out and then attach them, which is great. So yeah, you can actually use this script to convert a character that previously used constraints or contacts or something into IK and give it a try.
I actually have a question that I'm able to answer. It says, after the session, would there be a copy of this feed anywhere to use as reference? The Ferality YouTube will eventually post this edited down, probably, I'd say a month or so. But it takes a while for us to process 4 days worth of panels and then throw them onto YouTube, but they will eventually be put on YouTube.
And then whenever those get put onto YouTube, I'll link them on my Jinxie page as well, so that way it's all in one place. So that'll be a way to kind of connect the dots together.
I have a fun question for you from Sacred. If VRChat could do one thing to make your life easier, what would it be?
Oh, yeah. Right now, there's two big things that I'm fighting from the VRChat side of things. One of them is the scaling. I want to be able to find a way to scale these VRIK scripts and grounder scripts. But the other big thing would probably be I'm running into some limits that I found that are like once you have too many scripts on a character, you stop calculating some of them. Those two things are absolutely driving me crazy. But we can work around them. We've worked around them so far. We can keep doing that if we need to as well.
Question from Polynomial Rainbow. I hope I read that right. The words are really tiny. Can the IK system be used for arms or more multiple limbs like spider legs?
Absolutely, yes. In fact, that's one of the main applications for this kind of system is to original applications was to use this for spiders. So you could attach a bunch of VRIK together, because you can put a bunch of them, and they would walk like a spider. If you've seen any spider avatars in VRChat, that's a common technique for that. For extra arms, you can use IK for that. The application that would be necessary to use IK for that would be if you have arms of different lengths, or if you want to be able to do some kind of like world positioning stuff and some more advanced features with extra arms. I will say though, if you're just doing extra arms, honestly, the new constraint system is great. If you rotate your bones perfectly and you get everything kind of set up and mathematically right, you can actually just have the local option check marked on the constraint settings, and it'll move your extra arms very well. I'm gonna try and find that slide. Sorry. It's way back here. I'm sorry. I don't know if I'll be able to get there quick enough for this. It's in the advanced options of the constraint. There's a little drop down for some advanced pieces. Yeah, I'm not able to find it. I'm sorry. Yeah, but there's a little drop down there. One of the options is called local constraints. It's something that I actually asked VRChat for when they were making the new constraint system, and it was a huge godsend for the sake of using extra arms, because you can just use those to attach it. Yeah, sorry, I can't find that slide right now. It's in there though. There's a little picture of it.
Question from Zeke, or is that 2Ks? How is the performance on Final IK?
Oh, it's the performance. Okay, that's a good question. So in general, I will say that using IK components is more performance heavy than using constraints or a bunch of other techniques. But it's not so bad that it will immediately crash anybody or anything like that. It can be more efficient in some ways. So specifically, if you're trying to do things like a bunch of aim constraints, you'll actually find that IK is more performant than those kind of systems. But when it comes to legs and stuff, it's more about the features, because you get something out of this that you can't really find an easy way to do otherwise. So that's the big advantage here. But performance-wise, it's not the end of the world. It definitely is a little bit more heavy than other techniques, though.
Question from Desmond. Does Steve have feelings?
Does Steve had feelings? I don't know. He either has like compassion and love for everyone, or internal rage. I'm not really sure which one.
More so a request. Would you be willing to do a spider limb demonstration or tutorial at some point?
Yeah, I could certainly make a tutorial like that, or demonstrate how that's done. I will refer to a person named Scion. He runs a Discord specifically for the sake of spiders. So if you need information on that, or if you want to find out how to get there, we'll probably post a link in the chat or something later. But just in general, though, I would recommend going to there. He actually has a script that generates all of that stuff. It's you give it the hips and it just kind of puts it all together. I don't know if it's been updated in a while though, so we'll have to take a look at it and see where that's at. But yeah, there's definitely lots of spider community people out there. It's a similar topic for sure.
Shan, is it possible to make the IK legs look good on Quest?
IK on Quest. So that is something I didn't actually refer to here. I probably should have mentioned it sooner. We even though these components are whitelisted on PC, they are not allowed on Quest. So even if you try to upload them, it'll tell you a big error. You're using scripts that aren't allowed. You'll have to remove them to be able to upload on Quest, unfortunately. At least for the time being. Now, you know, maybe they'll change that in the future, but for now, we cannot use any of this on Quest.
See, can final IK be useful for multiple wing sets?
Multiple wing sets. That's an interesting application. So on the topic of wings, let me kind of explain a few things you could do. So with a combination of constraints and IK, you can actually attach wings with IK. I've done that on one of my new bases that I've released. You can see it in my booth. There's a set of what I call hexapod mode, where you can go down and it'll actually use the wings to walk as if they are a set of legs. But regardless of that, though, the question related to multiple wings, yes, you can absolutely do that. It is kind of fun to be able to try and imagine different ways to attach those kind of things. So I definitely recommend experimenting with it. When it comes to wings, extra wings like that, I think constraints would be a better choice. But if you wanted your wings to touch something and hold on to something, then you might want to look into IK. That gives you a little more flexibility there. But constraints will be fine for that usually. Or animations.
And while we do have a good amount of time here, did you want to go over any of your bonus slides?
Yeah, I can go back to some of that and kind of hit it in more detail. So I kind of glossed over a lot of this just to get us through to the time. But let's see. So some of the things I didn't talk about were like this blend tree and these animations. So specifically, let's talk about animations. When it comes to remapping animations and trying to get them to actually attach to a non-humanoid character, the biggest trick is that you need to make sure that your hierarchy inside of your Blender project matches your hierarchy inside of Unity. So that way, when you export it, you don't set it up as humanoid, but it will attach it that way. What I've done is a lot of times I'll set up my characters and such that they have their own set of controls and systems that allow them to move like an animation character inside of Maya, but you can do it in Blender. And then I constrain those control points to the example humans or the example whatever character I'm pulling the references from, and then just constrain them together. When you export, you can get those baked out into your new character. And so that's a common technique for trying to get non-humanoid animations out. This is a big challenge because it's very specific to your application and your character, and you must do this step in some way, shape, or form for each character that you want to attach it to. It's VRChat or Unity is nice because it has this system with humanoid IK where it kind of like takes a example animation with an example human, and then it knows, okay, I need to move this arm about this much and about that much, and then it puts it onto another human. But that only works for humans. And it only works for humans that are actually marked as humans. In the case of followers, in the case of quadrupeds, in the case of TARs and all that kind of stuff, you don't get any of this luxury. So you have to manually animate or find a way to attach all of that stuff. So that's one of the big things I wanted to call out earlier that I kind of glossed over. Also, tuning this locomotion controls, by the way, if you get to this step, VRChat has a very wonderful example of this already in the files. If you go into the examples from VRChat, you can find the locomotion layer, and there's all of this stuff is in there. The only thing that's not in there is that the animations are proxy animations, so you can't actually see the full animation. You only get one frame. And that's why when you go into preview mode and you try to do velocity, it'll just kind of like move into one pose. It doesn't really actually run. If you have a full animation in there, in the editor, when you do the velocity, you'll see the character actually running and actually doing the motions. And that'll be something fun for you to see once you get your character with proper locomotion animations. Sorry, is there any more questions? I can also continue.
I do have one more.
Okay, let me swap back to the end frame.
Question. If IK components aren't viable on quests, can we do them on PC and replace them with a simple VRC constraint system for uploading to Quest only? Would that cause issues?
Yes, you can absolutely do that. I actually do that on all of my avatars as well. So like my tar and my my quadruped and everything actually work on Quest as well, and they sync up between Quest and PC. Now, the problem with doing like two different systems on the two different platforms is that they'll be slightly desynced from each other. So like if I lift my foot on PC, it might not necessarily lift on Quest because they just won't see that animation happen because they don't have the IK scripts to be able to attach it. But if you had a whole system of animations and constraints and contacts and stuff, and you had all that set up just for Quest, then it would play those things on Quest, and you'd at least have some parity between the two systems. It wouldn't be perfect parity, but it'd be a semblance of making it look similar, and that might be enough.
In rigging many models, a new method for knees and elbows is to use double bones to prevent odd pitching at the join instead of using a box inset method with the edge flow. I'm wondering if you've seen this sort of armature before, and if so, will the script or method work with that sort of armature? It's a lot of words. I hope I read that right.
Oh man, that was a lot of words. Okay, so I heard something about. It sounded like you talked about the parallelogram technique. Can you repeat some of the question? I'm sorry.
Sure. In rigging many models, a new method for knees and elbows is to use a double bones to prevent odd pinching at the joint instead of using a box inset method with the edge flow. I'm wondering if you've seen this sort of armature before, and if so, will the script or method work with that sort of armature?
Okay. So in general, what I'm kind of understanding from that is that you're saying that there's a way to make your elbow movements look a little better. Twist joints are also a technique for doing that. There's a lot of ways to do those kind of movements, like movement corrective shapes and movement corrective bones. All of that should work properly with this system, but I would have to see the specific application to be able to really say yes for sure. But like if you have twist joints, for example, that should work with all of this because they're still in between. They won't get picked up by the script. They'll still twist and everything properly. But when it comes to your specific application, I'm not sure. I'd have to actually see it in Unity or something to be able to give you an idea for sure. Once again, too, for like really detailed questions like that, and certainly feel free to ask them here, but you should probably join the Discord and then ask them there, because I can really like share screen and really go through them in depth with somebody, rather than just kind of guessing at what I think it might be that you're talking about. I'm sorry.
Another question from Seafoam. Can IK be used to make arrows fall over distance when the shot and stop if it hit
Oh,
anything
yeah.
on the way?
That's something I've tried to tinker with as well. So the problem with a system like that is that you kind of need to calculate an arc. I will say that theoretically you could use aim-IK to achieve something like this. So aim-IK is kind of like allows you to have multiple joints along a chain and then target a specific location. So what you could do is you could put a lot of joint chains together, or maybe just two, and then kind of interpolate between them. And you could aim it at a location, and it would bend in a direction that you could then assign to world space up. And wherever you point, you would then be able to calculate an arc from that point. It would be kind of difficult to get it to be perfect, though. Usually, those kind of systems are like in games and such are calculated differently than IK. But you might be able to find a solution using IK as well there too. That would be a lot of fun to do. And then, so after you have those joints, then you would just like constrain it across the chain and then just smoothly move it through the whole chain. In general, though, I would say I think for arrows and such, particle systems are kind of more preferred. They're more performant and tend to work fairly well. I can't say that they're perfect, but they're at least in the right direction.
A little bit of clarification on that previous question. For the upper arm and lower arm, the old method is simply two bones with the edge flow model, having a box created with an inset. The new method I've been seeing is two bones at the knees, so that you have a total of 4 bones now. That's any clarification.
Okay. Yeah, I think once again I'll have to say let's talk on Discord at some point about that one, or maybe talk in the chat on here. I really need to see some pictures so I can understand exactly what's being described there. I'm sorry.
Not sure if I've read this one yet from Dragon. Where is the best way to learn about constraints and contacts? Many videos are outdated.
Yeah, so whenever you look up a video on that kind of stuff, you'll probably find like the old techniques, the old constraints and things like that without the new features. You know, I don't know if I have a really good place to ask or to recommend. You can try YouTube videos, experimentation with stuff in Unity. But in general, though, try to find some avatar or some creator or someone who's already doing really cool stuff with it, and see how they're doing it, and then see if you can apply that to your application. A lot of times it's kind of experimentation. That's where you got to dream big. You got to find, okay, I've got this cool idea I want to do, but how do I do it? And then you just kind of experiment and poke at it. Maybe ask some questions to other people and see if you can get some ideas to try. A lot of what we did here and a lot of what I do is just experimentation and guesswork until I get it to look perfect.